Hey, it's hammer time. On this special episode of It's Hammer Time, we've got Duncan Wood, the head honcho, el jefe, of the Mexico Institute at the Wilson Center. Duncan, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for being with us, Glenn.
And in fact, I'm at your studio.
Absolutely.
I noticed by the beautiful backdrop.
Mi casa es tu casa.
Muchas gracias. The first thing I want to ask is, you do have a British accent. How does a guy with a British accent become, in my opinion, the numero uno guy when it comes to U.S.-Mexico relations?
It's a long and convoluted story, but I left the UK back in 1989 and went to Canada to do my graduate work. And when I was graduating from my PhD, I was just looking for work, and I thought, that could be kind of fun. I'll go down to Mexico for a couple of years, get some experience, have some different life experiences. And I ended up staying for 17 years and fell in love with the country. My children were born there. Became a devotee of Mexican politics, in particular energy policy. And then in 2012, I moved up here to the Wilson Center and began running the Mexico Institute. And I have to say, it's been the best job of my life. It's been an incredible opportunity, and particularly at a time like this, with so much change underway. It's great to be right at the heart of the conversation.
Talking about right at the heart, so this week, we expect the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, NAFTA 2.0, whatever you want to call it, to be signed by the three leaders.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what you see ahead on the trade front with the revised trade agreement? Yeah,
I think that it's a deal that benefits everybody in terms of the three countries. It's a deal that guarantees that there is continued access for Mexico and Canada to the U.S. market. It guarantees the continuity of integrated supply chains in North America, integrated manufacturing production platforms. It's not a perfect treaty, of course, as many people have said. The slogan that many people have used is, well, it could have been worse, right? But it's pretty good. And I have to say that when you look at it from the point of view of Mexico, I think that Mexico is probably the biggest winner out of this deal.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Well, think about it. You have, in the automobile sector, which is by far and away the most important component of this, you have now a jump in regional content requirements from 62.5 to 75%. Where do you think most of that new production is going to be? In my opinion, it's going to be in Mexico.
Even with the increased wage requirements?
Yeah, the increased wage requirements, I think people have made a really big deal out of that. $16 an hour, 40% of the content has to come from those factories. Well, if you think about it, how much of an automobile that's manufactured today is produced in the United States and Canada, where those kind of wages prevail? It's around 40%. If you're also increasing the regional content to 75%. And here's the other thing, that the fact that Mexico has got a free trade agreement with the United States at exactly the same time when the United States is embroiled in a trade war with China, the Mexicans are laughing all the way to the bank, aren't they? Now, this doesn't mean that Mexico is about to undergo an economic boom, because there's lots of other factors, but I think this sets Mexico up very, very nicely.
If we could talk about some of the other factors. So December 1, AMLO takes the presidency. It seemed to be a honeymoon a little bit right after he was elected with the business community, and then you fast forward to several weeks ago when the airport, the planned new airport in Mexico City or around Mexico City was canceled, and then things started to seem to go the other way with the business community. What's your take on where this is going to go from the business perspective with AMLO taking office December 1? It's
funny, I think that most of us at the beginning of the transition period were pleasantly surprised, and we entered into a period of am-love. And now all of a sudden people are am-scared. People are running away from Mexico right now. Listen, it's still difficult to tell exactly how this government is going to be. The transition is not the government. Andrés Manuel has been doing all kinds of things as president-elect, and we'll see what happens once fiscal and financial realities hit home after December 1st. What is worrying, of course, is that the decision-making process does seem to be one which depends upon these public consultations or plebiscites. That sets a worrying precedent. They seem to like those a great deal.
Is there any precedent of Mexico doing that type of thing before?
No, this is a relatively new phenomenon in Mexican politics. A political reform that recently took place allowed for popular initiatives to be put forward, and it allowed for issues to be put to a referendum but only once a year and on non-fiscal issues.
Duncan, can you also talk a little bit about, we just had an election in the United States, and some would say if it wasn't a blue wave, there was definitely a pretty good election overall for the Democrats. But if you could put that into comparison with what happened in Mexico with the Morena party, because that to me is far more dramatic in terms of what happened, not just nationally, but in the different state governments where the two traditional parties just got really hit very, very hard.
So you have, you look at the results. I mean, Andres Manuel, as the Morena candidate, got 53% of the popular vote. I mean, certain presidents in other countries would have loved to have got that kind of popular vote. Secondly, in the Chamber of Deputies and in the Senate, at the Federal Congress, he got overwhelming majorities, and in fact, since the election, has managed to negotiate a supermajority in the Chamber of Deputies and is a few votes short of a supermajority in the Senate, which means that sets him up to be able to change the Constitution more or less at will. And then, as you say, at the level of the state legislatures, out of 32, he won 19. In addition, he won 5 out of the 9 governorships, and I expect that that Morena wave will continue. So what he set the party up to be, and when I say he set the party up to be, because I say it with intent, because it really is a personality-driven party at this point in time. But he set up the party to be a hegemonic force in Mexican politics. Maybe just for 6 years, but maybe for a lot longer. And when I use the term hegemony, I use it with intent as well. Because hegemony is not just about being dominant, it's about people assuming that you are the natural party of power, that there is no alternative. And right now, they're in a good position to be able to do that.
Final question. We have a lot going on right now with the caravan, the migration from Honduras and Central America through Mexico to the United States. What's the best way for the United States and Mexico to work together? It seems like an area where we really, both countries need to work together, and this seems that this was going to be a pretty major test for the incoming president.
Yeah, it's clear that somebody dropped the ball during this transition period. What was happening was that the incoming administration in Mexico said, this is not our responsibility, we're not the government yet, we don't want to touch it. The outgoing administration said, why would we deal with this? This isn't our issue anymore. And so there was a lack of communication between the US administration and the incoming Andres Manuel administration. So what's the solution? What's the way out here? Well, I think it has to be taking up some of the statements that Andres Manuel made earlier on this summer and in the fall, where he said that he would be willing to give Central Americans work permits to stay in Mexico. And so by using that, and maybe with providing them with some temporary housing, temporary employment, schooling for their kids, that then a deal can be struck with the United States to say, look, we'll keep them on this side of the border, but you have to guarantee us that you are going to process their refugee applications, and it's going to be done fairly, and it's not going to take too long, because the last thing that we want is a permanent encampment on Mexico's northern border.
Final question. With the potential, the importance of keeping these borders open, I mean, there have been threats that the borders could be closed. I mean, just real quickly, just an economic sense of how
it's a nightmarish, catastrophic scenario. We're looking at the loss of billions of dollars. You think about what two-way trade is, $1.6 billion a day crossing that border between Mexico and the United States. You think about the hundreds of thousands of people that cross the border just at a crossing like San Isidro. And we're looking about across the length of the border. It's a crazy scenario. Everybody loses out of that. So let's hope that calm heads prevail. Let's hope that a solution can be found.
Thank you for being on the show and for your wisdom and your work in this area that I believe is as important to the success of the United States economy as any other area. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you, Glenn.